So you're like calling up Derek Jeter and you're saying, can you take a dump for me?
We decode the microbiome of the most fit people in the world.
You can reverse engineer like LeBron's gut and turn me into a monster athlete.
We reversed engineered Captain America, and now it's for everyone.
So who are you and what the fuck are you doing here?
It's a good question. I ask myself that every day. But my name is John Scheinman. I'm co-founder and CEO of FitBiomics. We're a microbiome innovation company. We develop next-gen probiotics that could, fundamentally change our health.
Really? See, I think you undersold yourself because I heard you're a beast, right? You're into gut health. You're some type of fucking scientist, right? And semi-pro athlete.
Yeah, well, the saying goes, so I got my PhD in biomedicine, NYU. I did my postdoc in Harvard Medical School. But the only reason I did that was because I wasn't good enough to make the NBA. I played basketball at St. John's, won a Big East championship, NIT championship. But yeah, I guess, it was just saying I wasn't like Mike. So I decided to become a scientist as a backup.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting backup. I don't think most people that get into sports have that backup.
Yeah. Well, actually, we were talking about Comic-Con and pop culture and arts. Actually, I went to Fame High School before that. I was a tuba player. So, I'm just a city kid. I grew up in Greenwich Village, got into performing arts, basketball, and then biotechnology.
Sounds like a super nerd athlete, right?
Exactly.
I mean, how many athletes are super nerds?
Probably more than you would think.
Really?
I don't know. I think people have so many interests. And actually, honestly, athletics and science and even the arts are not that dissimilar. I think a lot of them requires dedication, almost to kind of like a level of being crazy and stuff, just sort of trying to perfect and be an expert at your craft. So there's a lot of similarities, I'd say.
So, I feel like your probiotic has something to do with like performance, right?
Yeah.
So how much of like being an athlete had to do with merging these two fields?
Yeah, I mean, again, my background is in popular arts, athletics, and biotechnology. So actually, all of those are infused into FitBiomics. So to give you a background of the company, actually what we do is we decode the microbiome of the most fit people in the world, these elite athletes, the 0.01% of the human population in terms of exercise physiology. We understand what's unique or enriched in their gut, and then we translate those insights into these next-gen probiotics that everyone can benefit from. And it's kind of a merging between, let's say, elite athletes and like superheroes, right? And so it's basically understanding what works in Superfit and using that to help everyone.
So, the athletes you're using, are these people that like I would know, or they're just...
Some of them,
Yeah.
We work with, so when we say elite athletes are the most fit people in the world, it's usually they're professional athletes, Olympic athletes, sort of world championship levels. We've predominantly worked with, ultra marathon runners, people that run 100 miles at a time, Olympic rowers, swimmers, wrestlers. So maybe not necessarily household names, but in their specific sport, they're like the best in the world at what they do.
So you're like calling up Derek Jeter and you're saying, can you take a dump for me?
I mean, I wish. Derek never returned my calls. It's a pitch that's, you have to refine.
Yeah.
But
it can't be a sexy pitch though, right?
It can be.
Yeah.
Well, to let you know, actually, when I was at Harvard, basically, I would go around Boston 8 hours a day for 2 weeks, just driving the Zipcar nonstop, collecting stool samples from elite athletes. I actually went to the Rio Olympics, and I was running around the Olympics, like recruiting athletes and pitching them on giving me their stool. So, it's a fun.
So you want to give me the pitch? How does it work? Like pretend I'm like somebody you can,
Well, the pitch is different now than what it was then, because now we've actually translated all that research into products, into actual probiotics.
So now you don't sound like a lunatic, right? At least you can be like, yeah, we have something in a box that like works.
Now it was worth it. But I think the pitch back then when I'd work with elite athletes, it was basically like, hey, listen, you represent sort of like the most fit people in the world. There's something in your body that works better than anyone else in society. How would you like to be a part of like this very revolutionary research initiative where we're understanding what works in you and we can now apply that to helping broader populations in society? It helped that I said I also work at Harvard and this and that. But just so you know, that crazy pitch was the foundation for a publication that went into Nature Medicine, one of the most prestigious journals out there. So there is this world where crazy becomes, cool and
Yeah.
like real.
It's backed by science. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, so are you creating a probiotic, or is this just like a performance drug in disguise?
That's a great question, right? I think probiotics, calling what we have, so, Nella and Vianella, maybe I should tell you what they do, but in many ways, calling our products probiotics might be a disservice. These actually are just novel health solutions, right? We're actually redefining what probiotics can do in our bodies and in terms of human performance and holistic health. Like, for instance, we just brought to market a microbe, if you will, called Vianella, and it's unique in that it eats lactic acid in our gut to fight fatigue and power our muscles for more endurance. Like, no, that doesn't exist in the world of probiotics. So I do think it is microbiomes meets health and longevity meets human performance.
So are we looking at a world now where the microbiome is going to be patented? Are we like, is this a big pharma discussion?
I do think, actually, we could probably thank GLP-1s for this. I do think the world between consumer health and pharma is getting blurred, right? And I do think probably the people pushing that are maybe the consumers themselves. I mean, think about where we are in society. Just to let you know, in terms of biotech, translational medicine, 10 plus years, billions of dollars to create a drug, less than 10% success rate. Look at where we are. Over 60% of the population has a chronic disease, right? Our current paradigm in health and healthcare isn't working, right? And I think consumers, they don't want to become patients. They want to stay consumers, and they're demanding more innovation in an accelerated path that they could have access to.
So why should we trust this product, assuming that, like, this elite poop we're getting, right?
Yeah.
Is really, because I've watched movies. I see how, like, Babe Ruth was a degenerate or whatever, like, but he was like, best home run hitter out there. How are you really, sifting through this?
Yeah. Well, I think, we were just talking about this. It almost takes Be Like Mike to another level, except for real. Instead of, drinking an electrolyte sugar beverage, if you will, because that's what Mike drinks, or wearing sneakers or wearing clothes, we're actually looking at the biology in these athletes. And to your point, I loved what you said about, is this pharma or a health? Because actually the scientific rigor behind our innovations are just as rigorous as pharma and traditional biotech translational medicine. So literally years and years of R&D and translation has gone into this. We've published everything. Not only have we gone through, rigorous third-party testing, but also rigorous clinical testing, right? So everything we do is not just backed by science, it's sourced from science, and it's built by science.
That's awesome. So again, let's be real here. I feel like gut health is like the new trendy thing. I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm in the space, but I've been getting pounded out for the last 6 months to a year with, one thing or another, whether it's AI, analyzed gut health, or, custom probiotics, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
What makes FitBiomics better, and just not just hype?
Yeah. Well, let me just be frank, right? I mean, most of the stuff out there, candidly, is bullshit, right? It's all marketing bullshit. And I think most of it is just trying to capitalize on a trend and trying to capitalize on, I think things that are becoming popular and more commonplace. You have to understand, microbiology has been around for decades, right? But microbiomes, the NIH started the microbiome project maybe back in 2008. It was finished in 2012. So it's still a very novel field, if you will. Probiotics have been around for decades. Thank you. Oh my goodness, I'm having a brain fart. Jamie Lee Curtis, right? Again, I think what makes us different is we are not a marketing company. We're not taking generic probiotic strains and slapping a brand and doing some fancy marketing terms. Everything we've created, we've built from scratch. It's novel. You can't find it anywhere else in the world. It's, like we say, sourced from the finest microbiomes in the world. It's biologically inspired. It's scientifically built, and it's clinically validated. And I don't think you could find that anywhere else on the market.
Interesting. So, I've done a lot of these interviews, microbiome gut, in the last month or two. And, there's so many things going on in the gut, right? I've heard that dementia, autism, I mean, you name it, can be cancer, maybe, might even be able to be diagnosed in the gut. personality disorders,
Yep.
right? So how much of a product like yours is it just sitting in athletic performance bucket, or are there other benefits for it?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll just tell you the two products we have. One is called Nella, clinically validated and published for improving sleep quality as well as digestive health. And then the other one is Vianella. This is the one published in Nature Medicine, clinically validated. It eats lactic acid in the gut to fight fatigue and promote endurance. We always have a joke, especially with Vianella. Who could benefit from less fatigue and more exercise?
Yeah,
It ain't just athletes, right?
yeah.
And I think, especially if you look at society, chronic fatigue, again, metabolic syndrome, GLP-1 usage, right? This notion of movement and exercise as medicine. Even think about how, people are just addicted to energy drinks and coffee. Like, why is everyone so tired? Getting back to your question about the microbiome, I think two things to consider are, if you look at the chronic disease epidemic, actually, according to the CDC, two of the leading drivers are just poor diet and sedentary lifestyles. So actually, a lot of what we're eating and lack of exercise is kind of killing us way more effectively than anything we could think of. And of course, our microbiome interfaces with everything we eat. So there is this dynamic between diet, exercise, and the microbes in our gut that's affecting every part of our body, whether it's our brain, our immune system, our muscles, right? So it's just this very dynamic relationship, and what we're putting in our bodies has a tremendous impact on that.
It's interesting you say this, right? Because you look at the chicken or egg theory. So you take these elite athletes, right? And is it that their bodies are built differently? Is it that their diet? Is that their conditioning,
Yeah.
right? And I'll let you answer which one it is. But then the secondary part of that question is, okay, so these people are producing this flora, can I call it?
Yeah.
Right? And now I'm taking their flora. Do I need to now exercise, eat properly, and all this other stuff to really benefit from it?
Well, we don't call it exercise and a pill for nothing, right? I mean, I think, listen, the answer is yes.
So which one?
Exactly. Actually, what we're learning is that personal genetics has the least, influence over our microbiomes. What we know from, research is that actually diet and environmental exposure plays the biggest role on this. What I love, I've always been infatuated with this term, form fits function. I'm a big believer in natural selection and evolution. So you have to think about what we eat and our physical activity impacts our microbiome. So in Western societies, high fat, salt, sugar, antibiotics, completely depleting our microbiomes. Look at these elite athletes, right? Look at these folks. They run 100 miles at a time, right? So they're actually training their bodies to select for microbes that cater to their physiological needs. Things that the rest of the population is just like, we're not doing that. So when you look at a microbe that eats lactic acid, right, it's enriched in ultramarathon runners because they're running more, their muscles are producing lactate, it's filtering into the gut, and this microbe uses it as a food source. So they have this positive feedback mechanism that the rest of the population doesn't. Now, the trick is we could harness that, we could extract it, we could translate it, and now give it to everyone to have less fatigue and be more active.
But if I'm not exercising and not producing more lactic acid, then is there something for the microbiome to consume? Or now,
So this is actually a great, lactic acid metabolism in general is misunderstood, right? Yes, when you exercise more, have intense physical activity, it spikes in abundance in your blood. Actually, lactate is normally in your blood and in your body at basal levels. It's actually a natural energy source for your muscles. What we discovered too is a lot of people just felt lactate goes into the liver where it's converted into glucose. What we discovered is that a significant portion of lactate goes into your gut where it interacts with your microbiome and serves as a food source. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying is that you don't have to be a super athlete to benefit from a microbe that eats lactic acid. All of us can benefit from it.
Okay. So you're telling me you can reverse engineer like LeBron's gut and turn me into a monster athlete?
What I'm saying is that we could reverse engineer LeBron's gut, Serena's gut, Captain America's gut. I got a story for you on that.
Okay.
And help you just be a more healthy human being.
And I don't have to do anything extra.
I mean, it helps.
Okay.
We have this phrase, right? These aren't magic pills; they're science pills. So on one hand, if you take something like a Vianella, you're going to have less fatigue. That's clinically proven. You're going to have more natural cellular energy. It's going to power your muscles. This isn't caffeine. It's not a nootropic, right? It's something that is going to help power your mitochondrial and your muscles. So you'll have more energy naturally, but then when you do exercise and work out, you're going to have more stamina, you're going to have more endurance, and you're going to be able to recover quicker. So it's a very important positive feedback loop. And by the way, something for like Nella, it's going to help you sleep better, right? Which everyone can benefit from.
So, it's another two-part question. Is this a replacement for performance enhancing drugs? And if not, how far are we from that world?
Yeah, I think performance enhancing drugs are, maybe they have a negative connotation in terms of, athletes, right? So again, we never think of ourselves as an athlete supplement company or sports nutrition company. We think of ourselves as a generational health company, right? We're creating these novel solutions that fundamentally change the way we optimize our bodies. So, again, I think something like Vianella, even if you look at performance enhancing drugs, these are, growth factors, steroids, things like that. You have to consider microbes and probiotics naturally occur in our gut, right? And probiotics have existed for decades. We're just sort of like disrupting the notion of what a probiotic can do. So yes, they improve and enhance human performance, health, longevity, physical fitness, but it's more of just like a consumer health product for everyone to benefit from.
So you talk about that. We were talking about the MCU before, right? And, how far is a product like this from, let's say, the government weaponizing it?
Yeah. Listen, I think, and we'll get to MCU in a second. Actually, let's get to it now. Let me geek out. So, I'm a big comic book guy. What's really cool is if you look at Captain America in the serum he took.
Yeah,
right?
this is where I'm going with it. Yeah.
But actually, here's a fun fact. Actually, if you look at that and you sort of Google it and Wikipedia it, they say Captain America, the serum basically enabled him to have like super endurance, greater than any Olympic athlete you could think of. And it says, furthermore, he has super endurance because the serum enabled him to sort of like deplete toxins from his body. And if you click on toxins, it's lactic acid.
No fucking way.
Yeah. So I like to say we reversed engineered Captain America, and now it's for everyone. I think to your point, any technology could be perverted, right?
Yeah.
And could be used for nefarious purposes, right? At the end of the day, we have, critical health needs for consumers and a health crisis in this world. And what we're doing is developing technology that could solve those problems, right? What we're doing is creating safe, novel solutions that are accessible and affordable for people to be the best versions of themselves.
So you still didn't answer my question. Are we going to be Captain America one day? Can we get to that?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
But it's not going to take the government. It's going to take fitbiomics.com, right?
So, we went back to some of the other ideas of how the gut really almost controls the body, right? I always go back to that like joke where they said like who's in charge, the brain, the legs, the asshole, right? And in that joke, like we found out that the asshole controls the body, right? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And so when we talk about the microbiome, can it be? Can you take some type of probiotic that'll make you fearless, right? Or something that'll, really help you, get out of depression without therapy or things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, by the way, fun story. Remember when I was describing this initiative years ago? I'm talking about, this was almost maybe, 10 years ago at this point to someone. I was like, yeah, you're as much bacteria as you are human, right?
I think you're like, it's a 10 to 1 or is it 1 to 1?
I think it's changed. Now it's more of a 1-to-1 ratio. However, you do have 100 times more bacterial genes in your body than human genes,
That's
right? And just the numbers are, over 90%.
Let's get existential here.
Yeah, but it's funny you say this, right? I love the whole asshole runs the house thing.
Yeah.
90% of certain neurotransmitters are produced in your gut. over 90% of short chain fatty acids, which power your muscles, are produced in your gut, right? I remember I was talking to someone skeptic, right? Big skeptic. I love the skeptics. They're like, yeah, but John, if I had 10 people in my house, it's still my house, right? And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, but if you had 10 people in your house, it's going to change the way you live, right?
Yeah.
The assholes run the house.
Yeah.
So we should take care of those assholes and make sure
Yeah.
they're happy. I forgot your question, but speaking
I
about
for-
assholes,
Yeah. I forgot my question too. Oh, no, more about can we start manipulating,
yeah.
because to back this up, so we've known about the gut. You said, oh, this has been around for years, whatever. There's that saying gut instinct, right? So
Yeah.
somebody knew there was a gut brain connection. But why is it just now everyone's focusing on it?
I love it. Simple answer is because the technology is caught up to sort of our instincts. I also got to say this. If you think about molecular biology, you're talking about maybe it's less than a century old, right?
Yeah.
If you talk about genomics, I always say this, the first human genome was published around 20 years ago. It's an effort that took, 15 years and $3 billion. Today, we could sequence a human genome for $1,000 in 2 days.
Yeah.
You're talking about orders of magnitude acceleration in our capabilities because the technology is so sophisticated. Think about what AI is doing right now,
Yeah.
right? So the simple answer is we didn't have the tools previously, right? That's why it's catching up, and that's why it's seemingly every day we're just discovering more and more how impactful our microbiome is. To your question, again, I'm a big movie guy.
Yeah.
Matrix.
Me too. This is why I want to see this stuff.
The Matrix is one of my favorite films. One of the most influential. I feel like Tony Stark, Bruce Wayne, and Neo. Those are the folks that influenced my life. But that scene, right? When Morpheus, are you saying that one day I'll be able to dodge bullets? And he's like, no, Neo, when you're ready, you won't have to. And the whole concept is everything is programmed, right? There's code behind every fabric in society. And I would say it's the same thing with our bodies, right? Our microbiome, to your point about mood, right? Think about dopamine signaling, reward signaling, and how it affects depression and mood. Yes, we could one day correct that with microbes that are producing enough dopamine levels, right, to circumvent depression. I'm not saying we're there yet. I'm saying that we will get there, and probably faster than people realize. I think, some of the other things too, one, we mentioned sort of lactic acid, right, and what it does. Also think about this. I just want to, there are direct mechanistic benefits of microbes in our gut and what they do, right? And then there are secondary benefits from, let's say, sleeping better or exercising and moving more. So for instance, our first product, Nella, it improves sleep quality. But it also does something interesting. It's doing it through the immune system. It's reducing inflammation. It's reducing oxidative stress. It's sort of reducing stress hormones. So think about that, right? Better sleep, right? Better recovery, less stress, less inflammation. That has a broad impact on everything we do. The same thing with exercise, right? I mean, there's all sorts of science and research on the more you're active, right? It impacts your muscles, mitokines, mood, things like that. So these microbes are doing a lot of things, both mechanistically and then secondary from helping our bodies function better.
So, let's shift gears and talk about, you'd said everybody should take this, right? But, I always hate the everybody. I always look for really, good groups of people,
Yeah,
right?
man.
Right. So, who should be taking this?
Listen, what we're seeing is, so you're right, everyone could use better sleep. Everyone could use less fatigue, more movement. Actually, what we're seeing is middle-aged millennials, right? This 35 to 55-year-old demographic, which I fall under, we are just so fucking tired, right? Why are we so tired? I mean, because life happens, we're getting older, our bodies are changing, our metabolism is slowing down. We actually talk to a lot of new parents, right, that have kids now. And I remember talking to one of my former colleagues. She's like, John, man, I'm a mother of 2. I am tired all the time. I feel like I'm fighting life, right? Yeah. And, this was a former athlete that is used to moving, but now can't do it. And, now taking our probiotics, they're kind of helping her have more energy, helping her move more. So I think that's what we're seeing, right? I also think, when you're younger, you probably feel like you're invincible. You could do whatever you want. I think as we get older, right, it's then we start to wake up and like, wow, I should start thinking about my weight. I should start thinking about my longevity, how I need to exercise to maintain my muscle, right? Because that depletes as I get older. So I think the middle-aged millennials are really the ones that are gravitating toward these products.
That's interesting. You mentioned kids, like, should we be giving this to kids? Like, where's the line between optimization and eugenics?
Yeah. So just to let you know, I mean, really, we only sort of recommend this for adults. We have not done any clinical testing on, minors or kids. Everything we've done has pretty much been like 17 years and up. And obviously, I think if anyone has like medical conditions or stuff like that, then they should consult their physicians. I do think these things would benefit. One day kids or infants. Again, I know there are these scary terms, right, about eugenics or like government or performance enhancing drugs. I think we should just genetic engineering, right? All these scary words. I'm more scared about the food system, right? I'm more scared about all the fucking chronic disease that's, propping up because we're on our phones all day and we're eating shit, right? So I think this is an interesting conversation, and it's all marketing and propaganda.
We're only getting started. So.
I love it. I love it. At the end of the day, we have real problems with health and society, and I think we need to create novel solutions that could address these. And to your point, not marketing bullshit, real innovations that could fundamentally change societal health.
That's interesting. Is this the first step to like over-the-counter designer humans?
Again, I think semantics and nomenclature, this is the first step towards democratizing translational medicine. Except, again, 10 years, billions of dollars to create a drug, less than 10% of them work. Think about what we've done. We've literally translated the biological data of the most fit people in the world and turned it into probiotics that could help you sleep better and move more. We did that in a fraction of the time with orders of magnitude less capital. You want to call that designer human beings, or do you want to call that a paradigm shift in how people have access to healthy lives? I would choose the latter.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, listen, steroids, I call them steroids because I don't even really know what the proper term is. They're illegal in baseball, football, whatever it is. We know remember the home run, like, debacle that was going on 15, 20 years ago.
I was a Mark McGwire fan.
Yeah, right? Like, and you look back at that period and you're like, these were like superhumans, right? So, do you see these types of like, and again, I'll call them drugs, right? Because I don't have a better word for them, right? Do you think that's going to eradicate like natural talent, level the playing field? Like something like steroids did for...
Again, I think, I love this conversation. I think we're taking the wrong narrative and perception, right? I wouldn't think about leveling the playing field for athletes. I would think about leveling the playing field for human health and longevity. Again, you talk about design. Think about GLP-1s for a second, right? 40% of the population is obese. 70% of the population is overweight. GLP-1s, by the way, discovered 40 years ago. So again, think about translation life cycles. Cost hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars a month for people.
Thousands of dollars a month. If you're here in the UK, it's 100. So,
yeah. Okay. Yeah. And now they're being cut and compounded with salts. Can people afford to take a pill for $1,000 a month that's going to help them lose weight, right? So
that only has like a 10% success rate, that people mostly quit after 3 months, and after a year they gain all the weight back.
Not to mention the side effects and shit like that, and muscle loss, right?
Yeah.
So I think if we talk about leveling the playing field for athletic performance, it's the wrong narrative.
Yeah.
Go to Eli Lilly's website on what are the most important things you could do when taking GLP-1. Two of the top things: movement and sleep, right? So building healthy lifestyles. So when you wean off these GLP-1s. So what I would say is FitBiomics, Nella and Vianella, and innovations like those are leveling the playing field so people could live healthy lives.
So you mentioned something interesting, the GLP-1. Should we be stacking this with the GLP-1?
100%.
Yeah.
Now, again, we spoke about direct metabolic health benefits as well as secondary benefits associated with just moving more. So, again, with Vianella, I just want to say what's interesting, if you look at GLP-1s, what do? Right? They improve insulin production, which in turn could lower and regulate glucose levels, which is associated with diabetes. They also basically, it's a peptide that essentially tricks the brain to being less hungry, right? If you think it's something about Vianella, think about what it's doing. We spoke about this. Lactate traditionally is produced in the muscles. It then goes to the liver where it gets converted to glucose. What Vianella is doing is in the gut, circumventing that process, turning lactate to propionate, a short chain fatty acid, which in turn can now power our muscles and mitochondria. Muscle health is inversely correlated with insulin resistance, right? So there are direct metabolic benefits that are synergistic with the GLP-1. But to your point, just the fact of moving more, exercising more, it's going to be synergistic with usage. And then it's building lifestyle habits for when you stop taking GLP-1, you could keep the weight off.
So you know what I find interesting? I had a microbiome expert on last week, and he mentioned that they solved a rape case with microbiome.
Wow.
And I was blown away. And he said that they were able to match the microbiome of the vagina and the penis together to prove that the rape had happened.
Yeah.
Right. So you're probably wondering where the fuck I'm going with this. But so is your poop like more important than your DNA? Does it say more about you?
I would still go with DNA as a way to really identify you uniquely, right? I think forensics and DNA has been used for decades to solve criminal cases.
Yeah.
I do think our microbiomes are distinct. They're unique. There's tremendous variability. But I would still say personal DNA and genetics is more used for these sorts of cases. But with that said, I mean, yeah, I do think microbiome diagnostics, again, maybe less about crime and more about personal health is where I would go with it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not using the crime reference. I'm just saying in general.
Yeah.
We extract DNA. I think last week they just brought back a wolf, right? These scientists.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you heard about that.
Yeah.
That had been extinct for, 13,000 years or some shit.
Yeah, 10,000 years.
It was 10,000 years, yeah.
Yeah.
So you heard
that
about
came
it,
out
right?
of that came out of our lab at Harvard. No, seriously.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Those are friends.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's it's awesome shit, literally. So, and I understand we're not probably rebuilding humans out of, gut bacteria or things like that. Yeah. But, my point is that it's a powerful
100%. But again, I think I love this because listen, at the end of the day, right, my background is in biomedicine, genomics, tech development, cellular engineering. First and foremost, if you think about millions of years of evolution and natural selection, think about farming, right? Again, the famous example is what did corn really look like and how have we selected for that, right?
Yeah.
I think societal pressures, right, in terms of why certain things become popular. Why does Gatorade become popular? Okay, because Michael Jordan loves it.
No, because they're good fucking marketers.
Well, there you go. But that's an evolutionary selection pressure, right?
Yeah.
Having more money
means
you could dictate the rules of society. Let's not get into politics, right?
Yeah.
So I think your point about democratizing, right? What technology is doing is saying, you know what? We might not have to accept certain things. We might not have to accept extinction, right? That may happen because of random reasons in the environment or stuff like that, or because they're assholes destroying the environment or stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
We may not have to accept chronic disease, right? Because, we have microbiome-based modalities that could help alleviate that or prevent them, right?
So, it's an interesting you brought up because, I think we look at, cause versus cure and, all this other stuff. I mean, what bucket are you in that, I think chronic illness in the 1950s was in single digits in this country, right? You mentioned it's 60%. I use this figure all the time. It's burned in my fucking brain. And
everyone's brain.
I mean, no, I don't think most people understand that it's 60%. Like how many people in this room have chronic illness? I have chronic illness, right? And no one else raised their hand. No one else does here. You do. See, what about you? He's not paying attention. He's on the phone over there. But
That's a chronic condition, by the way.
There you go, right? But we could cure that. Um, and so I feel like you're talking more about the cure than the cause, because if we educate people on good habits of health, good habits of eating, whatever, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
the
I mean,
blue zone shit, right?
education is easy, right?
Is it?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point, right? I
Yeah.
think, listen, I think you bring up, there's this notion of, I think selection pressure, right? Marketing, propaganda, accessibility, affordability, technology, habits. It's a very complex environment. The only thing we could do as innovators and technology companies is try to create the easiest modality possible and make it as widely accessible and affordable. I just want to say this: GLP-1s, $1,000 a month. Something like Vianella, $2 a day.
Yeah.
It's cheaper than fucking coffee. It's
Yeah.
cheaper than prebiotic sodas. It's cheaper than protein drinks. And it's the most fucking sophisticated microbiome innovation you could think of. That's what Fit Biomics is doing,
Yeah.
right? So that's all we could do. Give people the tools and the resources and the access
Yeah.
to be successful.
Excellent. You mentioned those stupid sodas. What's your take on those?
Listen, everything has its role.
I don't know about that. I think
I-
they taste like shit. I'm wondering if they work.
I think they taste good. Listen,
Really?
you have to think about this. Now listen, marketing hype could be bullshit. Yes. You got to try and sell and make money, blah blah blah. I look at it very simply, right? Traditional soda, 50 to 70 grams of sugar. Prebiotic soda, 5 to 10 grams of sugar. I could give a fuck what it's really doing clinically.
Yeah.
It's just preventing people from drinking more soda, right? Now, is it affordable? Does everyone have access to it? I don't know. But I do think PepsiCo buying Poppi, right? Yeah, Pepsi should be promoting fucking healthier soda alternatives, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So you agree it's healthier at least?
it ain't as bad as the traditional stuff.
Yeah.
right?
And now, honestly, are they doing anything? Is another kombucha wrapped in like a tin can?
Yeah, probably. Yes. But
Yeah.
who gives a fuck, right?
Yeah.
Like, again, unfortunately, this is where we are in society. Is it better than the status quo?
Yeah.
And if it is, that's a good place to start,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
As long as they're not selling poison, right? Agree,
But they are selling poison, because you just said Pepsi is poison, and then they bought Poppi, right?
well, I mean, listen, at the end of the day, if Pepsi is suppressing it, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if Pepsi is saying like, you know what, maybe we should do better.
Yeah.
You know what, maybe we should use our distribution channels to promote a healthier alternative. Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, I don't know if you remember Slice. When we were kids, there was a soda called Slice or something, and I haven't seen them in a while. And recently, I was in Costco yesterday, and now they're rebranding Slice as a probiotic soda.
Okay.
So, it's I don't really know the breakdown. I think a lot of them are like stevia based and things like that, which I'm like not a huge fan of. But when you're talking about stevia versus whatever whatever the hell they
Yeah.
put in there,
Yeah.
for these other sugars, so you do agree that it's a better alternative.
My feeling is this: everything in moderation.
Yeah.
I think excess is what really leads to issues, right? Again, like
I think that's a tough one though, because if I have a little bit of McDonald's and a little bit of alcohol and a little bit of soda, that's all moderation of crap, right? And I think this is what we go back to. This we're talking about the education piece.
yeah. You just gotta sort of infuse a moderation of exercise, right? And a moderation of healthy alternatives, right? And proper sleep and stuff like that. So, I don't know if we should regulate people's lifestyles or dietary prerogatives. I
Yeah.
think again, we shouldn't be promoting and selling garbage. Right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I know, I agree with you. Fit Biomics, is it biohacking or what is it exactly?
I mean, it's the ultimate biohack.
Yeah,
Again, I go back to this. We're literally isolating biological components of the most fit people in the world, and we're translating that into a probiotic capsule that everyone can benefit from. So, I mean, all these terms, biohacking, longevity, human performance, performance enhancing, health and wellness, drugs, what do they all mean?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, be less tired and move more. That's what Vianella does.
I love it. Okay, my final question is: are you ready to become like an MCU villain when this stuff starts changing?
Listen, man, you would be surprised. Carolina will tell you this. My muse for Fit Biomics is Tony Stark. I ain't trying to be a villain. I'm trying to use technology as a superpower,
Uh,
right? I'm trying to power the Avengers and the young Avengers. And like, I will say this, since you opened up the door, I think people underappreciate what the MCU is. Think about this. You basically had comic books, right? And you had this whole paradigm for storytelling and like movies. What MCU did is they turned comics into this forever storytelling universe that's fundamentally changed cinematic history, right? I also love the idea of MCU as a startup. MCU, when they started, didn't have access to the most popular characters. They didn't have Spider-Man. They didn't have X-Men.
yeah.
And they were like, you know what? We're going to try and do this with RDJ, who might be the most risky cast you could think of. And we're going to have to use some of the least popular characters. And they fucking made it work
Yeah.
because they got to the heart of the character and storytelling, and they fundamentally changed the script. So that's what Fit Biomics is doing. We're fundamentally changing the script for translational medicine and how people are optimizing their bodies.
And don't forget, you're the underdog too.
Amen. God bless you.
Cool. So I did a little digging and
Uh-oh.
I checked out. Yeah.
Uh-oh.
So things you've said publicly, right? So we can
Okay.
put you on
Okay.
on fire, right?
I love it.
You said, you say this. You study elite athletes. I'm sorry. You say you study elite athlete microbiomes. Why not regular people? Is this creating a more health inequality?
I think it's the exact opposite. So just to geek out, right? If you look at the general population, again, 60% of us are, not healthy. And there's so much variability and noise, right? Think about everything that makes a microbiome unique. If you look at the general population, you're going to see this broad distribution, and it's going to be hard to understand what's driving health or disease. The way to go is to take this very, very, very unique, narrow population that's enriched for physiological benefits you're looking for. And we see this. Your signal to noise ratio is much greater. So I'll do it with my hands. General population, biological data is widely spread out distribution. If you look at these super elite athletes, 0.01% of your population, their microbiome data is like this needle in a haystack.
So you're saying that they're all very similar to each other?
So it's nuanced.
Yeah.
Think about this. The 0.01% of the human population is going to be very similar to themselves compared to everyone else. Now, if you zoom in on that needle in a haystack, then you'll find endurance athletes are different than strength athletes. And you'll also find even at the strain level, right? So we spoke about Vianella. What's really cool is this notion of a lactate eating microbe. It's unique. It's enriched in athletes compared to non-athletes. But the athletes themselves has different variations on them, right? That's evolving to exercise, right? So to your point, we're going to the super fit so we can now make those traits accessible to everyone, or make those microbes accessible to everyone.
Another thing, you compare this to decoding the human genome. What makes you think bacteria are more important than genes?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the asshole in the house kind of thing, right? I think it's a factor, right? Also, to your point about, is this elitist or is this enabling and accessible? Personal genomics could be very deterministic, right? I mean, it's very hard to correct certain things, obviously gene therapy, stem cell therapy, regenerative medicine, things of that nature, right? I think if you look at microbes and what they do, right? They impact the immune system, inflammation, they impact neurotransmitters, brain function, they impact lactic acid metabolism, muscle metabolism, right? Digestion, IBS, Crohn's disease. There is so much we could affect by modulating and optimizing our microbiome, which to me makes it probably the best place to start.
You said we're redefining performance. Are you also redefining ethics?
Yeah, we are. We are making health accessible and affordable for everyone. And that's redefining what health traditionally has been.
So do you see a world where we can sans drugs and like eliminate drug use, or let's say
type of drug?
no, I'm talking like, you You talked about chronic illness, all these other things, right? Inflammation. People are taking drugs, whether it's aspirin, whether it's Enbrel that's shot into your body,
Yeah.
right? These things that are shutting off your immune system or lowering the inflammation chemically. Do you see a world where we can eliminate or reduce the use of these?
I would say reduce. Listen, I think there are certain, we spoke about this with genetics versus microbes, right? There are certain genetic diseases or things like that, right? Where, especially, listen, the best form of treatment is prevention. So, I go back to, even at Harvard, and my mentor said, yeah, John, what is the cure? What is the solution to living forever? It's preventing chronic disease. So I think we should start with preventative medicine. Disease, especially associated with age, happens. When people get diseases, then medication and therapeutics are necessary. I think these are just, opposite sides of the same coin of trying to help people be healthier longer.
But I also think, you said with age, disease comes into play, but we're seeing accelerated
Yeah.
play of disease at younger ages,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that's because we're fucking it up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, listen, if you think about cancer traditionally at least is a disease associated with aging. A lot of it happens because, listen, like any machine, right? With wear and tear and age, components start to break down, right? You have, with DNA replication, you have DNA repair machinery that over time will break down, which will lead to more mutations, which could lead to cancer, right? Now, what causes, let's say, mutations in our DNA? If you're eating crap, right? If you're assaulting your body with toxins and stress and inflammation, it's going to create an environment more conducive towards things breaking down. So again, I think what we eat, right, our lifestyles is, because it's becoming so bad, it's accelerating chronic disease and everything that comes from it.
Well, another part you said what we eat, and I wanted to circle back to the beginning just so it's clear. When you eat improperly, you pretty much destroy your microbiome,
Yeah.
right? I know I'm being extreme here,
Yeah,
but for all intents and purposes. So if we're taking Nella, Vinella, these things like that, and we're still eating improperly, aren't we just destroying that?
Well, I think, again, they're no magic pills, right? They're science pills. I think Nella and Vianella become components of a holistic, healthy lifestyle. I do think Nella and Vianella are very unique, right? So, for instance, Nella, it's reducing inflammation, it's reducing oxidative stress, it's helping people sleep better. At the same time, it's also actually improving our microbiome composition. It's improving abundance levels of Bifidobacterium longum, which is an important strain in our gut. It's also improving abundance levels of I can never pronounce it right, F. protnutzi, which is a very important strain in our gut and has all sorts of anti-inflammatory effects. So at least it's creating an environment that is, beneficial to a healthy microbiome. And again, with Vianella, if exercise is a form of medicine, it's enabling your body to move more, right? So there are ways where directly it's improving microbial composition and function, and there are ways where from a secondary, I'm sleeping better, I'm moving more, it's helping you to restore your microbiome as well.
So another piece of this is, as far as I know, and you can educate me better, is this the only patented like prebiotic out there?
Amen.
Right? And, so are you now big pharma, and do we have to worry that you're going to develop these products, get bought out by XYZ, and now we have another, kind of proprietary health product on the market?
Well, all I could say is what FitBiomics values are, right? We said this kind of off air. We like to talk about values versus valuations. I'll just say this right now. If we went the pharma route, Vianella would be $1 billion asset today, if not more. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, close your eyes. Harvard spin out, Nature Medicine publication, metabolic health, clinically validated.
You're not making me feel any better. I'm worried that you're going to get sold or IPO tomorrow.
But think about what we've done. Instead of selling it, right, for billions of dollars, we've turned it into a $2 a day capsule. That's what we've done.
Yeah.
Right now, you might have marketing people that try to manipulate that. I'd be as worried about consumer health marketers as I am about pharma, right? So I loved what you said about being the underdog. That's what FitBiomics is. We're doing things radically different than both consumer health, which is marketing,
Hmm.
as well as pharma, which is just IP drug development. And we found a way to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this so transformative.
So, you mentioned Harvard a couple times. I know you're partnered with Harvard, the Gates Foundation.
We're not
No,
with
you're
the
not.
Gates Fund, no.
Oh, okay. Then that must have been in. So, and any other major institutions. How do you respond to people who may, instantly distrust those names?
Well, I think it's a broader conversation on distrust of higher education and sort of academia and what's preserved to be elitist colleges. And there's a big assault on that these days. I'll just tell you right now, I went to public schools. My parents, for their whole lives, were public educators. My brother's a public educator. I went to Fame High School, St. John's University, NYU, and Harvard. I'm a big believer in education. And if people, distrust higher education, fuck them.
Cool. So Nella claims to boost sleep, recovery, and focus. Where's the FDA in all this?
Here's where it gets interesting. We're not going down an IND drug development route where we're treating disease and creating a therapeutic or pharmaceutical. That's what the FDA regulates. We've decided to go a different route, which is the GRAS, generally regarded as safe supplement route, where we're not treating disease. However, we are making health claims, right? Not indications for a diseased population, but things like sleep, fatigue, endurance, right? These are not therapeutic claims, and they're all backed by clinical studies. The FDA, now there is FDA GRAS, but FDA is really more, as long as the FDA will be around, is still right now looking more so over therapeutic and drug claims. So it's a different sort of domain, if you will. But I can't tell you I can tell you the amount of rigor that goes into translation, quality control, good manufacturing sort of facilities, fermentation, clinical validation, sequencing the genomes to make sure they're safe. The amount of rigor that goes into safety and translation for GRAS, if you do it the right way, can be as rigorous as the IND route.
Okay.
By the way, this is maybe a family-friendly show. I was thinking about it. Listen, if people don't believe in higher education, I wouldn't say fuck them. I mean, I would say. I could understand, this goes back to our values and accessibility and affordability. I can understand right now with college tuition being so expensive and costly. I can understand how it's perceived by the layperson to be a scam and something you can't trust, or it's elitist and who could afford that anyway. So I do think this ties into why do people distrust pharma, right? Why do people distrust big corporations and stuff? Because I do think when things get down to affordability, P&L, bottom lines, and everyday people are being left out or hurt, I understand that. I guess what I'm here to say is that, places like Harvard, especially with de-extinction, right? Dire wolves, right? Regenerative medicine, FitBiomics, next-gen microbes. These are institutions that are actually accelerating innovations to fundamentally change our lives. And that's what I would say. Think about it from that perspective and less of the propaganda behind it all.
Yeah, I think the question really lies, I think David Sinclair's at Harvard, right?
Yeah.
And
They let anyone to Harvard these days.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, I don't even know what that fucking means, honestly. But I do know that they publish information, and even the stuff he's put out has been highly questioned by other peers in the field. And I think it's less about trusting Ivy League education for yourself, and more about trusting is Harvard putting out a narrative that's in their best interest that really isn't true. That's really what the fundamental is.
I think at the end of the day, branding and marketing, whether it's politics or consumer health or pharma or higher education, right? It's all marketing. I think the question is it truthful marketing, right? And again, I would say that Harvard is one of the premier institutions in the world. It's built its brand for a reason, right? Yeah. There's credibility behind that brand. Does that mean there's some, bullshit behind some of it? Probably.
And mistakes happen too, right?
Exactly. Yeah, everyone, right? All I can say is that, my time there, I think, was spent with some of the brightest minds in the world, right? That's created technology that could fundamentally change, the quality of people's lives.
So, are you marketing this product to athletes?
No, everyone but athletes. Again, I think for us, Fit Biomics, right? And you could see this as our branding and marketing. It's a generational health company, right? Again, we're fundamentally changing the way we optimize our bodies, right? That's, full stop. That's what we're doing. We're leveraging the microbiome to create these novel microbes that could help our bodies function better and move more. Now, can that help athletes? Absolutely. But it could help a lot of other people. And I think people that want to sleep better, people that want to move more and be less tired, they should definitely check out Nella and Vianella.
Now we're going to switch over a little bit to just probably a lot of topics we covered already,
Yeah, absolutely.
but just like spitfire questions or things like that. So I'll ask you a question, answer it or skip or whatever. So let's be honest. Are you just creating gut steroids?
I mean, if that's what you want to call them, I think we're creating guts that function better, that help people function better.
Does the average American gut microbiome scream McDonald's and depression?
I mean, it certainly seems that way. I mean, I wouldn't just put McDonald's in there. I think there's a whole bunch of other companies.
We love to blame them,
Yeah, I mean, listen, everyone likes McDonald's every now. I will say this: if I may, I was coming back from the airport one day. I picked up my girl from LaGuardia. As soon as she landed, we got in the car, and she's like, "We gotta go to McDonald's." So we're somewhere in Queens, Queens, right?
Did you go on a tirade with her and explain to her what it does to her gut?
Well, this was so I try to do things in a a way that's maybe more humorous. And we went to a McDonald's. We found some place, and I was like, you know what? Let me try a chicken nugget. And she was like, but John, you're a pescatarian. You don't eat meat. I was like, well, that's not real meat anyway. So I mean, there are different ways to get people to think about what they're putting into their bodies.
I actually like that. That's pretty cool. So you mentioned your supplement company, right?
I mean, we're not a supplement company,
No.
right? We're an innovation company that's
Okay.
creating new health solutions.
Okay.
I think, maybe they get classified as a supplement, but like you said, how do you blur between biotech, pharma, consumer?
Yeah, my issue here is that and I put a figure, I don't know what the percentage is, but I feel like, supplement companies are not regulated. It's like the wild, wild west. I feel like 90% of them are just selling you bullshit. What
Amen.
makes you different?
Harvard. How about that for branding? No, I would say, again, we have the rigor of a pharma company in terms of innovation, discovery, again, looking at what's working in the most fit people in the world, publishing our results, creating proprietary health solutions that no one else in the world has, translating them, going down rigorous quality control, safety testing, clinical validation, right? New functional applications. By the way, what you said is 100% right and true, which is why we created the company. Technology should be a solution, right? Is it better than the status quo? Can we do better, right? Can we find novel ways to accelerate health solutions to people that need them most? And that's what FitBiomics is doing. And that's why we are not a supplement company. I think the summary is most supplements out there are bullshit for many reasons, whether that's marketing, claims, innovation, functions, third-party testing, what goes into the capsules themselves. FitBiomics is the exact opposite in there. Everything is novel, proprietary, clinically validated, scientifically proven, third-party tested. Anything you could think of, we're basically doing.
So are there any secret side effects that this is producing that you haven't really, you've discovered, but you haven't really validated?
Yeah, I mean, the only side effects is you just sleep a lot better
Mhm.
and you're able to have more energy and move more.
Mhm.
I guess the other side effects are that people need to drink less coffee. And actually they don't feel compelled to take naps during the afternoon because they have so much energy. No, but I think, listen, anytime you put a novel probiotic or microbe into your GI, right, there is a period of adjustment. With any probiotic, there could be some bloating or gassiness, or you may go to the bathroom a little bit more.
Mhm.
That's completely normal. That usually means it's working, but that typically subsides after 2 weeks. Actually, when we did our last clinical trial with Vianella, we found that the placebo had more adverse events than Vianella itself. So,
That's funny. Yeah.
yeah.
Placebo's a crazy thing.
yeah.
Is there a way to maybe manipulate your gut in a way that could create people that are less violent, right? Or fix addictions or anything like that?
Well, I think addiction, listen, you're talking about things that might be related to neurological wiring components. It could also be related to stress. Um, I definitely think neurology, brain functionality, and things of that nature, certainly there's a path towards um, correction and optimization through the gut microbiome.
So do you think if your microbiome's trash, that there's a way back to rebuilding it?
Oh, 100%. I think, the initial studies that really brought microbiome on the map were fecal transplants, right? Most notably for like C. difficile infection. That is basically if you take antibiotics for whatever reason, medication, injury, surgery, what happens sometimes is this pathogenic microorganism comes in, takes over, and causes all sorts of inflammation and bad issues. So you depleted your microbiome, and now this pathogen comes in. And what people found is with like a 95% cure rate, if you just put in stool with a new microbial composition, it outcompetes that pathogen and restores your health. That was the big like initial step. There were also studies showing, fecal transplants between lean and obese mice. You could sort of, translate stuff like that. Again, think about what we're doing. We're not doing fecal transplants. We're taking more of a precision approach.
Yeah.
We're identifying, again, with Veillonella, this microbe enriched in people that run 100 miles at a time. It eliminates fatigue, promotes endurance. What we're finding is, through clinical validation, that one microorganism, if people introduce it into their GI, they're less tired, have more energy, and can move more. So, yeah, I think microbes, whether it's consortia, whether it's communities, or just in some cases a single microbe, it could have really profound impacts.
So you mentioned fecal transplant. Are we gonna be drinking urine next?
Well, let me put it another way. Think about blood transplants. Think about stem cell transplants. Think about organ transplants, right? This notion of microbial transplants, if you will, whether that's stool or probiotics, it's actually not that radical. And the concept is the same. Identify what works in healthy people and now provide that to non-healthy people.
So, I think the problem with like urine or shit is that it's waste from the body, right?
Is it?
Like,
Yeah,
I don't,
guess so. Yeah,
I'm asking this
yeah,
question.
yeah. Well, I do think maybe urine and stool are more diagnostic in nature, right? But with that said, they're sort of windows into how our body is operating, right? Now, urine, I think that's more minerals and metabolites. So that is really diagnostic. I think what makes stool so interesting is that 60% of stool is actually bacteria, these live microorganisms. So in some cases, we could be flushing things down that are actually very important, right? And I think it's a way of identifying what's going on in our bodies, how to fine tune that, but then potentially how to help a lot of other people.
So, I look at guys, let's say like Keith.
By the way,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
What's one person's trash is another person's treasure.
It's true. It's true. I mean, listen, I think fundamentally as society, we have these like misconceptions or these abnormalities that get placed in our head. And we look at saying like, well, shit is dirty, urine is dirty, blood is clean.
New
or
York
like,
is dirty, but
yeah, right. Yeah, and I think maybe what you're saying is we need to, rewrite the narrative on what's, it's the human body, right?
I
Is a
love it.
booger gross? Is saliva this, that, whatever, right? And another piece I look at, I love to use Keith Richards as an example. The guy's had like crazy life.
Yeah.
He's 80 years old, 80 plus. He's still getting on stage for 2 hours a night. Some of these elite athletes, are these guys doing something that we don't know about? And is that like, I know it just can't be they're getting shot with testosterone or something like.
What you just said opened up, I think, this is the real thing we're doing. Forget athletes. Think about it as outliers. Think about it as natural selection and evolution. Why are certain people in society exceptional? How can we decode that from a biological perspective? It could be elite athletes. It could be people in blue zones. It could be centenarians, right? It could be artists, whatever, right? How can we decode that? And now, here's the craziest thought, democratize that, right? So that is really the key behind Fit Biomics. And that's actually, if you think about how we've evolved, yes, we work with elite athletes, but I rarely say, oh yeah, we're decoding the microbiomes of elite athletes. I say we're decoding the microbiomes of the most fit people in the world, super performers, outliers, right? People with optimized exercise physiology, because that's what it is, right? So I think to your point, it's not just athletes, right? There are folks that are exceptional and I think understand. It's also a different paradigm from traditional biomedicine. Traditionally, what we do is we study disease, what's broken, what doesn't work, how can we correct it to promote health. Fit Biomics is taking a radically different approach. We're looking at what works, what's been selected for, and now democratizing that.
I mean, I've always like looked at older people and I've spoken to them because I feel like they're a book of knowledge. Because if you see a guy who's really in great shape, you start asking, what'd you do? Oh, well, I exercise 30 minutes a day or I stretch or whatever, right? So I think there's a lot to learn from looking at fit people.
I also say, tongue in cheek, I love, first and foremost, elite athletes, 0.01% of the human population, if you define that professional, Olympic, and, collegiate, they're as rare as centenarians. Think about that, right? Yeah. But we don't think of athletes like that, right? But I love this, this goes to your point about Keith Richards. I think the New York Times, they did a survey and they just interviewed a bunch of centenarians. Like, what did you do? Like, what have you done? And I love it how it segregates into, you had some people that take it real serious. I ate 2 egg whites a day, God's food, this and that. Yeah. And I love it when you get like the 100 women like, shit, man, I fucking smoke cigarettes every day, right? Like, yeah. Or you have someone's like, man, I drink some bourbon before, right? So I love it, to your point, there's some people that are just resistant. Something like the Captain Americas of the world, right? Yeah. It's like, what is in them, right? And it ain't Gatorade. But I love that. But even, again, people that maybe they can drink alcohol or smoke and their body's defense systems and mechanisms are so resistant to it, right? And shouldn't everyone have that, right? That's, I think, really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they don't have the levers, right? And that's a big piece of it. So you talk about these elite athletes, and that's who you're studying. Why aren't you studying, elite people in other fields?
Yeah, I think you have to start somewhere. Yeah. So first and foremost, just from my background, right? Former athlete, played at St. John's, won the Big East Championship, didn't make it. So I think for me, I'm inherently sort of into athletes and athletic performance. It's ingrained in me, and I love the notion of bridging the gap between pop culture, popular mediums, and cutting edge technology. That's where we started, and I think you do, again, have to pick a place to focus. What I love about athletes, we spoke about centenarians. You could ask them, what do you do differently? People don't even know. It could be diet, it could be inherent in them. What's great about athletes are they have very discrete phenotypes and quantifiable, like, physiological components, right? You can quantify strength. You can quantify endurance. You could quantify speed. You could quantify recovery. So in that sense, we already have mechanisms and tools in place to objectively understand what they're good at. And now we could link it with what's going on in their biology. So it's a little bit of my background, but also what is the best population to go after.
So what's the next step for Fit Biomics?
I mean, making the world a healthier place.
No, I mean more specifically, like, creating a product in this area, or lowering costs or distribution. Well, like, how do you see the future?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've lowered costs by orders of magnitude. So I think that's a good place to start. I want to say a few things. One, we're still at the early stages of these innovations. Like Vianella, right? We published that in Nature Medicine in 2019, and we literally just brought it to market last summer. So you're talking about something like what is that? It was like a 5-year translational timeline.
Do you need a vacation? You're telling me no new products?
I mean, that would be nice. But I got Nella to help me sleep. But what I'm saying is, we're just now appreciating the applications, right? Again, think about lactate metabolism, think about fatigue, metabolic health, mitochondria, muscle health, right? So I think what's interesting is when you think about VLA, you're like, oh, athletes. But when I think about VLA, I think about perimenopause. I think about chronic fatigue, right? I think about people with long COVID. I think about healthy aging and longevity. I think about metabolic syndrome in people taking GLP-1s. So I think our two products could actually have dozens of applications. So I think testing those is a key next step for us. And then to your point about innovation, we have another 15 plus microbes that we've discovered, things for strength, things for mood, things for recovery. Innovation has its own life cycle. So I think starting with what we have is good. But, I look at FitBiomics almost as like this biological database, right? We're sort of understanding what's working the most fit people in the world, and we're translating that into all these different health solutions. So there's plenty more to do.
What's your biggest beef with the wellness industry right now?
Listen, I think, you just said yourself, like over 70% of supplements and wellness is bullshit. So what's your beef with the wellness industry?
Everyone knows what my beef is.
What's your beef? I'm curious.
It's for me, I tend to fall into I have like one foot being a cynic and the other foot being like very positive in a sense where I have like hope for humanity. And I think, it's something we spoke about earlier. Products like this come out, they're great. Somehow the product ends up in the wrong hands, gets sold or whatever, the founder dies. And then it takes like a U-turn or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that's one of my biggest beefs. I think the other big beef is a regulation of stuff. Like, for instance, my father-in-law called me up. He's like, oh, I got some nitric oxide off of Amazon. And I was like, let me send you, because I know the good companies, right? Go, let me send you some stuff. So he takes a nitric oxide that I send him, and I call him 2 weeks later. I'm like, how you doing? He goes, oh, that stuff is shit. I can't feel a difference. I'm going back to the other shit, right? I go, this is not right. So I look it up. It's like loaded with caffeine, right? And like to what we said before, this is a completely unregulated industry. And again, I understand, you got big pharma and a shot costs $1,500 because they have so much regulation and there are other issues. And they are also, doing their best to make their shareholders happy and all this other stuff. But there needs to be some type of regulation because, it's bullshit. And then the other side of it is education and testing, right? Not everybody needs vitamin C or zinc. Yeah. You need to get tested to see what you're deficient in. And just because your friend takes something and it works well for them is not, a carte blanche, blank check saying, oh, that's going to work for me, right? So those, that's how I feel.
Yeah, ditto, right? But what I would say is just to go back to your first thing, you're, what'd you say? Not skeptical. You said something else.
I'm a cynic.
You're a cynic, but yet you're positive. I'd say just replace cynic with skeptical, and that makes you a good scientist.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, that's what scientists are. We question everything. Right. We need data, objective data, to prove something, and it's an iterative process. Right. So again, my beef with the wellness industry is like everything you just said. There are issues, right? There's sequestering something through marketing dollars, right? And like claiming something else is yours, even though it's not, and jumping on trends. I do feel in general, it's interesting with nutrition. A lot of times, I hear this term nutritional insurance, right? And what that means to me is nobody really knows if something is working, but it can't hurt you, right? My feeling is if something in general is good for you and it can't hurt you and it's affordable, then I don't really have too much beef with it. I think if something is making bullshit claims, right, and it is harmful or it is expensive, then I think that's bullshit. But I do think society is interesting in how we're really a society of extremes, right? And I think this pharma versus consumer health, and they're literally both on like opposite ends of the spectrum. And I think the question is there a middle ground? Is there a world where we could take pharma, rigor, innovation, technology, validation, right, and find a way to accelerate it and make it affordable? And what I would propose to you is that's what FitBiomics is doing. And, I don't think we're the only ones doing that. I think, we're part of, an emerging trends where now, candidly, it's all about what the market wants, right? I think consumers want new innovation. They want to be healthier, right? And I think ultimately, I think that that's what's going to lead to success, and sort of disruption in the wellness industry.
By the way, you're not allowed to ask me questions. This is an interview of you.
Okay, okay.
Um, so do probiotics actually work?
Which probiotics? Sorry, that's a question. But again, we're doing these broad statements, right? It's just like, is Harvard a good university, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one, it depends who you ask, and it depends what classes you take, right?
Yeah.
Is New York City a good city? Well, it depends where you live,
Yeah.
right? Do probiotics work? It depends what probiotics you take. I mean, here's the secret with probiotics. The reality is a majority of probiotics are not differentiated. You may have dozens to hundreds of brands, but they're actually all using the same strains. They're just putting different formulations and different marketing and branding and storytelling behind it and blah, 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 right? I mean, and actually, if you look at probiotic producers, there's only a handful of them in the world that provides the same strains to global brands. Again, that's what's so disruptive about FitBiomics. You looked at IP, intellectual property, and things being proprietary is a bad thing. What I would say is, actually what that means is you can't find Via Nella anywhere else in the world, right? We're not a formulation company. We're an innovation company. So if you ask me, do probiotics work? Well, the only way I can answer that is FitBiomics probiotics work.
Yeah.
And you want to ask me about other probiotics?
Well, yeah. What I'm saying is like, you said most of the probiotics are made by, a handful of companies. How do I know that probiotic is something I need or that my body's going to react well to it?
Exactly. I think the reality is this goes back to pharma versus consumer. Pharma is more regulated, right? More clinical testing for specific indications, use cases, disease therapeutics, all that stuff. I think you're right. Consumer health in many ways is the Wild West. It seems to be dominated by electrolytes, vitamins, right? Probiotics, protein. This is all the essential components of health, right? And I think now, to your point, what's interesting with consumer health is now you're actually getting more, I think, like functional medicine, diagnostics, things. And, there's a lot of companies where this could be wearables or biometric tracking, right? Rings, straps, blood tests, right? Continuous glucose monitoring. So I do think there is technology enabling, consumers to understand their bodies better and maybe test in real time which products are working for them. So I do think that is a component that's helping people more.
Well, because like I always hear these things. You go to a doctor and they say, well, just go get a probiotic or a prebiotic or whatever it is. And then you go to the pharmacy and you see 10 billion this or, 100 trillion that. And now you're like, well, which one do I want? Do I want these amounts? Does it even make sense? Does it make it through the GI? Like, right?
Man. You just hit all of it. You're just checking all my boxes. Let me just say, first of all, here's a story. I went to see my primary care physician. This is not a knock. This is just, actually, I take this as a good thing, and how we spoke about technology, acceleration, enabling these innovations. I remember I spoke with my primary care physician. I told him what I do, microbiome probiotics. He's like, yo, John, man, first and foremost, you know more about microbiomes and gut health than I do. Like that was so real. Right. And then he said, John, I understand what you're doing. You're trying to put me out of business. And he's like, but you know what? I like that. Right. So I think that's interesting where technology meets, traditional medicine, health and healthcare. Just running through your list, you don't know. Right. Again, I think even doctors, you ask me this question, do probiotics, what do they do? Okay, you have digestive issues, you have IBS. By the way, IBS wasn't even a thing right until recently. I think over a decade ago, people were like, IBS isn't real. It's bullshit. Yeah. Now it's like, oh my God, IBS is a thing. Let's market it, right? Same thing with chronic fatigue. Oh, you just suck it up. Just get a coffee. Chronic fatigue isn't real, right? So again, I think there are these things that have been there, but now we're just understanding they're real. And to your point, if doctors or maybe a little bit behind, how do they know which probiotics to recommend, and how can they even get behind the marketing, right? They're not
Yeah.
marketers, right? They're just like, okay, you have a problem with digestion, take a probiotic. By the way, in terms of CFUs, anytime I see a high dosage CFU, most times, not all, because maybe in food you need it or maybe you need acute responses, most times to me it just signals it's bullshit. What that says to me is like your probiotic strain isn't viable, so you're trying to just like overload it to get some benefit from it. Or if it's like, we have all these different probiotics and it basically means you have no idea what they work. So I'm just going to throw a bunch of shit into it and hopefully something does. It's kind of like you said with nitric oxide and caffeine. This is a nitric oxide product. Let's just put a little caffeine in there so you feel something, right? So with FitBiomics, we have, relatively small CFUs because the probiotics work.
What is a CFU?
So for Vianella, 10 billion CFUs.
No, what is
what is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a colony forming unit, and it's a way of measuring how many live, like, probiotic molecules are in your product, right?
Okay. Define probiotic, prebiotic, postbiotic.
So probiotic traditionally is just basically a live microorganism that you could take that confers a functional health benefit. So live microorganism. And traditionally, probiotics are things that you consume orally that go into your gut, traditionally thought to be beneficial for digestive health. But now what we're learning is with Nella and Vianella, they do other things like fatigue, muscle health, sleep.
So is sauerkraut a probiotic?
So
Is poppy a probiotic?
so
Kombucha? Yeah.
so prebiotics are actually the food source that help these probiotics flourish and grow. So for instance, fibers traditionally are thought to be prebiotics, right? So you have like fibers and resistant starch, and if you consume them, then the good bacteria in your gut will eat them and flourish. And then what's interesting is, what is a prebiotic? If it's something that helps a good bacteria grow, lactic acid is a prebiotic because it helps Vianella grow and convert that into short chain fatty acids, which can now power your mitochondria and muscles. So again, I love when we get into, I was a creative writing minor in college. I played tuba at Fame. I went to Comic-Con. I just love semantics and nomenclature because I think we need to think outside of the box a little bit. And then simply put, postbiotic could be just like a dead microorganism that still elicits a benefit, right? For instance, you could have molecules on the surface of a microbe that could interact with the immune system to reduce inflammation. To your point about sauerkraut and fermented food, the question is, where can you get prebiotics, probiotics, or postbiotics? So for instance, fiber is a good source of prebiotics. How about this? Exercise is a good source of prebiotics because it's feeding Vianella in your gut with lactic acid. Fermented foods such as sauerkraut are a good source of probiotics because they have these live microorganisms in them. Cheese, yogurt, these things, right? There's sorts of Harvard studies, longitudinal studies that say people that have long-term health benefits, one of their habits are they eat a lot of yogurts, right? Your Mediterranean diets and stuff like that. So anyway,
I appreciate that because I think people, if you ask somebody what's a probiotic or prebiotic, they go, it's just something good for your body. That's probably the answer.
That's the point. That's the marketing point.
Yeah.
Right. So I think, there's a weird world where I think marketing should be education, right, and illumination. But I think in many ways today it's become obfuscation, right? Like, yeah, it's good for you. Don't worry about it, right? So anyway, that's also, I think, what makes us different in that our whole journey basically has been published in public and people could find it on our website.
So I recently saw an episode where a woman was able to, I think, smell Alzheimer's, right? And it was a pretty interesting thing to watch. Do you think you can detect other things through smell, through
100%? I mean, dogs do it, right?
Yeah.
I think, again, I love natural selection, evolution, biological components, super performers. I mean, I think if you look at nature and you have all these different organisms that evolve to have unique tasks, 100%. I think dogs could detect cancer in urine. I think cats or whatever, they could detect mood,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
maybe this woman is like the olfactory version of Captain America.
Do you think that your work can be weaponized?
Anything could be weaponized. I
Hmm.
mean, I think to your point about regulations, right? Transparency, validation, education, religion could be weaponized, politics could be weaponized, education could be weaponized, technology could be weaponized, food could be weaponized, pharma could be weaponized,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Transit systems could be weaponized, drones could be weaponized, social media could be weaponized. So uh, I don't think about that. I think about creating health solutions that have a positive impact on society.